I saw another one of those symbols the other day. I see it everywhere. Under a bridge, hidden in shadow by a mural. Once half buried in sand. Now, looking across the room to the opposite wall, I see it staring back at me. It's a very interesting figure, with loops and twists, never quite a straight line, but all comes together in an enchanting, unified emblem. There's always something sickly familiar about its form. I've been thinking about my childhood recently. I started life knowing so little, barely a spark, but those who knew better than me, my parents and siblings, gradually helped nurse that spark into a flame, and the flame into a lamp bright enough for me to see the world I took part in. As that light grew brighter, new shapes and figures were revealed. But these were just raw symbols, and they meant nothing to me until I connected them to what they symbolize. However enchanting an emblem may be, it carries no real significance without an explanation of what it signifies from someone with that knowledge. Sound, speech, pictures, paintings, all seem to demand explanation. As a child, this learning process is fresh and fascinating. But as I've grown, I've fallen into the habit of taking this world of symbols for granted. Sometimes doubt seems to grow through the darkness and crowd out our light. Sometimes the symbol we thought we understood is revealed to actually be the bearer of a different meaning. At certain times, the confusion, the contradiction, the mess may even cause us to abandon the idea that there really even is anything behind the symbols. Maybe the world is just made up of a bunch of free-floating shapes and colors that we arbitrarily label things like good or bad, true or false. But I feel like I have to ask, what does that make of me and you? Human beings. Aren't we all just part of the world's symbols? So is my significance up to everyone else's interpretation? Or maybe I make my own meaning. I am that which I say I am. In the end, how are we not really just meaningless? Something in me stubbornly resists this notion. But even if I don't give in to this dread, I have to ask myself, can I really see behind the curtain? Is it arrogant to say I can know what's really there behind the symbols? If I can't already tell what it is, then why not just accept that there may be nothing there at all? Some reject that there really is a true meaning for anything. It's all just about whatever you get out of it. And maybe I'm not quite in the same boat as them, but we're both sailing in the same sea. Perhaps they're just being more honest about the impossibility of there being any truth at all. Thinking about all this reminds me of a scene I saw a few years ago. I once was standing up on a stage preparing for a talent show for my choir. Hours before it began, before anyone arrived, I watched a boy, probably a sibling of one of the performers, step into the dim spotlight. He sat down at a grand piano in the center, and as the light sharpened around him, he raised his hands to the keys and played the first note, then the second. Every following note suddenly came crashing together, crashing less like an ocean wave and more like a freight train. No consistency, no discernible melody, only endless variation. A bit faster paced, and it can only be described as a tantrum. This harsh dissonance caused my ears to shrink back in discomfort. There was nothing for them to latch onto, nothing to follow. The boy looked as if he was quite enjoying himself. Didn't he know how unpleasant his playing was? He had ears. He'd heard what good music is supposed to sound like, and yet there was a sad, proud glow in his eyes during the performance. And as he continued, a smug smile crept along his face. As I watched the rest of this unsettling event play out, I heard something that caught my ear. Despite the cacophony, through the chaos, I heard a faint sound that my mind seemed to sway itself towards. While barely audible, the sound was unmistakably that of a chord emanating from another piano. It was sweet, and as such, it stood out from the erratic noise from the stage. I heard it again from behind me, so I turned to the curtain at my back. It was a little louder then, and as the minor chord rolled through the fingers of whoever was playing, the chord crystallized until it finally shattered into a blossoming major. I walked up to the boy, and he stopped playing. "Hey, why are you doing that?" I asked. He chirped back, "It's actually my own original song. I just play notes for the sake of the notes, you know? Music for music's sake. I mean, who makes the rules anyways?" Now, thinking back, I think he may have said more than he realized. The notes this child played, disconnected and dissonant as they were, he played for their own sake. I can't imagine that his performance would be tolerated as actual good music. He'd likely be kicked off a real stage for his artistic tantrum. But it was beautiful to him, wasn't it? Is that all that really matters in the end? The meaning of his work was that it didn't have to have any kind of real meaning. It was just notes for notes' sake. Symbols for symbols' sake. So what if the symbols don't harmonize to symbolize anything coherent? Can't they just be enjoyed for their own sake? Who's to say banging my fist on a piano isn't just as meaningful as Mozart? Who makes the rules? Now, if I think about it honestly, I don't really think that slamming keys on a piano is actually good music, or should even necessarily be called music at all. In music, the rules are sometimes bent to add a bit of variation, artistic flair. But removing all the old rules and replacing them with a new rule, which is to only break rules, isn't creativity. It's chaos. There's a recurring dream I often have of a transplant surgery. The dream takes place in a pale, fluorescently lit hospital room. Before me lies the body of a man stretched out on an operating table. I can see a single long incision mark running down its front, and the hands of a surgeon are now on either side of the cut as it's gently begun to be pulled open. I think I can see what looks like the intestines and something that could definitely be the heart. The hands begin pulling out the intestines and placing them in a bin. This continues until finally the organ that is most definitely the man's heart is severed from the body and placed in the bin. His chest has become hollow. What seems more surprising than all the organs being removed is that the surgeon places something in this cavity, seemingly to replace everything that he just removed. A single object gets wrenched into the void at such a position that it would be very difficult to dislodge it without harm. As the surgeon moves his hands away, the metallic shine of the scalpel is visible against the soft innards. With the scalpel lodged in place, the surgeon begins to sew the gap closed. Looking back on the dream, I personally think a scalpel would be an ineffective replacement for the heart, lungs, and digestive system. But if asked, this surgeon might reply that perhaps it would, for common purposes, but he doesn't need this body to function like it should. Why? Because there's no way a body should really function anyway. What something should be is up to each individual's interpretation of it. I might think a body is meant to walk, talk, and breathe, but that's just the meaning I've assigned to it. I have no right to say that's the real purpose, when so many thousands of alternative interpretations exist. If asked, the surgeon might say, well, why not replace organs with knives, if that's what I want? Well, maybe he's right. And maybe there really is no reason at all. But if asked, I'd say I don't think it makes much sense to replace intricate organic mechanisms with a knife, just for the sake of showing off that we can. If asked, I'd say it makes for a pretty skin-deep world, and not just skin-deep, but dangerous. A world like this strongly discourages digging deeper. Poke below the surface, and you'll find yourself pricked. Journey beneath the noise, let your mind wander too far, and you'll find yourself sorely disappointed by the pain of the vast emptiness that awaits you. Because really, at the center of everything is a blade, that's been perfectly placed to draw blood. But this isn't what should be there. This isn't how my body of beliefs should be. Staying above the surface, being open-minded, these are great tools. Likewise, cutting away false beliefs and doubting our unwarranted certainties. They make good tools. With them, we gain valuable insight into our world by dissecting what we know, gutting our beliefs, and discovering the intricacies of their inner workings. These tools exist for critique. We can bend the rules to better understand them. But these tools were never meant to replace the organs removed for examination. A knife can't pump blood. So how can beliefs be fueled by never-ending doubt and open-mindedness? So what now? Is there anything solid for my gaping mind to bite down on? Or do I just drift anchorless? I wish I didn't feel the need to envision life without meaning. But if a symbol doesn't know what he symbolizes, or that he even is a symbol, what does he really know? I'm not satisfied with stopping there and accepting ignorance. The boy on the piano rejected that there was any such thing as real beauty. The surgeon in the dream rejected that there's any way things really ought to be. Both are fools, not because they're ignorant, but because they prefer to be. I sometimes recall a particular memory of a literature class I took in high school, which illustrates the exact problem I face. In this class, we were studying a piece of poetry. It wasn't very long. There were only about 3 stanzas with a few lines each. What stood out to the class more than the structure was that every stanza had some word blacked out. Looking closer at the poem, it wasn't hard to guess that it was the same word being blacked out every time it appeared. Blank is like the smell of rain. Then, in the next stanza, blank is an owl howling curses in the night. And again, blank is as the crunch of leaves underfoot. This was no insignificant piece of the poem missing. The title of the poem was the same word, also blacked out. Reading through the poem, the only hint at what it could be was the rest of the metaphors and similes that would follow it. In poetry, the metaphors and similes used to describe an idea only makes sense because the reader can take what he knows about the symbols and apply it to what they're meant to symbolize. The meaning of the symbol and the symbolized is enriched by the comparison. But the author places the symbol in junction with the symbolized in order to draw out some similarity, some analogy that makes the symbolized known in a deeper sense and makes the symbol's purpose in the passage clear. Without the symbolized, like the word in our poem, the symbols, the metaphors and similes, don't have a clear reason for being there until we know what about them is specifically meant to symbolize the subject, the word. In other words, our whole poem's meaning was hinged on this single word. And what is the word? I was definitely curious myself. There's a sense of mystery around it. I wanted the word to be revealed so the rest of the poem's significance could click into place. Well, what the teacher told us was that there simply was no word. If you could reverse time and see what the poem would have said before the word was blacked out, you'd find that every blotted space was always empty to begin with. In the beginning, there was no word. I felt cheated. The metaphors and similes that exist in that poem are there for literally no reason, except to make that exact point. Finding out there was no real meaning was a frustrating experience, but I think this poem shows what I've been trying to articulate all along. I don't think life is meaningless, but if I don't know what everything is supposed to symbolize, I think I basically end up saying it's meaningless anyways. When I wasn't told what the metaphors in the poem symbolized, maybe I had hope that they would have some real significance. But because I didn't know what the significance was, I couldn't really say that they signified anything. Is that any different from where you and I are now, knowing they mean nothing? Only our hope for a satisfying answer is gone. So is the difference between those of us who don't know what the meaning of everything is and those of us who have decided that there is none, just blind hope, a leap of faith. And when the curtain's torn down and the body's opened up, is there just going to be nothing inside? It's a lot to think about. And honestly, I just want to go to bed. I've stayed up too late thinking these thoughts again. But I know I won't sleep, however much I try. If I don't know what my existence is supposed to be revealing, I'm just as good as a metaphor in a purposeless poem. When I was little, I had someone who knew better than me to explain the meaning of the symbols, to fan the spark into flame. Parents, siblings. But they're also just drops of shape and shade in this sea of similes. They too are purposeless if I don't know what they symbolize. So what I need to know is, what's behind the curtain? What's pumping the blood? What is the word? I saw one of those symbols again today. Not in the middle of a crosswalk or in a coffee shop where I sometimes see them. This morning, he was staring right back at me as I looked in my mirror. This time, he knew he was a symbol. And this time, he remembered what he symbolized. What do we symbolize? I believe we've always known, deep down, who we symbolize. We might not always recognize it, or know that we know it, but it unavoidably drives everything we do. Whenever we have that deep desire for meaning in the world, it's a gift of his that's meant to always lead us back to him. Whenever we create beauty in the world, it's a small picture of him because he is beautiful. We're imperfect analogies for a perfect reality, and we've been given a special role in this world of his symbols. We are metaphors in a world of similes. So what does a symbol do once he knows what he symbolizes? Isn't the whole mystery solved? Well, that's the beauty of a metaphor. It leaves room for mystery. It doesn't have to answer all the questions. Because I haven't reached the end of my knowledge. I've really only found where it begins. I can start digging deeper into the infinite, knowing that there's meaning in every moment. The universe is a work of self-expression, the chosen piece of art crafted by an artist vastly beyond any beauty we could ever imagine. Come, taste and see that the Lord is good.